I didn't expect rejection to sound like a joke. We were standing in my son's dining room, under a bright white light that made everything feel exposed. My coat was folded over my arm. My old shoes squeaked slightly on the polished floor. His friends were seated at the table, laughing, sipping drinks. I cleared my throat and said quietly, "I thought maybe I could stay here for a while." My son laughed. Not loudly, worse, casually. He leaned back in his chair, looked at me, and said, "Dad, this isn't how life works. You don't just show up and move in." A few people smiled awkwardly. Then he added, with that same smug tone, "I mean, what did you expect? I've got a real life now." The words hit harder than I expected. And then came the line that cut deepest. "I can't have an old man with no money dragging this family down." Silence swallowed the room. No forks moved, no one breathed. Even the clock on the wall seemed louder than before. I stared at the table, my face burning, my hands numb. I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I just stood there, shrinking. That's when someone I didn't know spoke. A woman near the window, one of his wife's coworkers, looked at me carefully and said, "Excuse me, are you the same Mr. who funded the community shelter on 5th Street? Every head turned. My son frowned. "What shelter?" Before I could respond, another guest whispered, "Wait, that was him?" The mood changed instantly. Confusion replaced amusement. Curiosity replaced judgment. My son stood up, laughing nervously now. This must be a misunderstanding." Then my grandson walked into the room, 10 years old, barefoot, holding a school notebook. He looked at me first, then at his father, and he asked the question that stopped everything. "Dad, why are you embarrassing Grandpa when my teacher says he helped save a lot of people?" The room froze. My son's face went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, he looked unsure, small even. I slowly picked up my coat. I had never told my son about the things I did quietly, the nights I worked late, the money I gave away instead of saving, the promises I made to myself after his mother died. I never thought it would matter. But standing there, watching the respect return to people's eyes, I realized something. The truth was about to come out, and when it did, my son would finally understand who he had just humiliated. To see how we reached this moment, though, we need to go back 20 years earlier, to the day I made a choice that changed my family forever. If you want to know what really happened next, and why my son's words came back to haunt him, subscribe now and don't miss part 2. This story isn't over, not even close. 20 years earlier, my life looked very different. I was still working double shifts, waking up before sunrise and coming home long after dark. My son was just a teenager then, angry, quiet, always asking why we never had enough like other families. We lived in a small rented house near the old hospital. Every night, I'd sit at the kitchen table counting bills, choosing which ones could wait. I never complained. I never explained. The night everything changed, it was raining hard. The power went out. My son was asleep in his room when my phone rang. It was the hospital administrator. There had been an accident, a bus crash. Too many injured people, not enough beds, not enough money. They asked me a question that still echoes in my head. "Can you help? Even a little?" I looked around the dark house, at the cracked walls, at the unpaid bills, and I thought about my wife, my son's mother, who died in that same hospital years earlier. She had once told me, "If you ever can help someone, do it quietly." So I did. That night wasn't the last time. Over the years, I helped fund beds, medicines, and later a small shelter. I never put my name on anything. I never told my son. Why? Because I wanted him to build his own pride, not live under my shadow. As he grew older and more successful, I grew quieter. I downsized. I gave more away. I told myself I didn't need much. But life has a way of circling back, and standing in my son's living room years later with one suitcase and nowhere to go, I realized something painful. The sacrifices you hide the longest are often the ones people forget first. The next morning, my son called me. His voice was different, tight, careful, like he was choosing every word. He didn't apologize, not yet. Instead, he asked, "Dad, where are you staying?" I told him I'd found a small room near the bus stand. Cheap, clean, quiet. He went silent for a moment, then said, "We need to talk." We met later that evening at a cafe near his office. Glass walls, bright lights, people everywhere. He liked public places, kept emotions under control. He didn't. The moment I sat down, he leaned forward and asked, "Why are people saying you helped fund a hospital wing?" I stirred my tea slowly. "Because it's true." His eyebrows shot up. "Then why didn't you ever tell me?" I looked at him and said, "You never asked." That hit him harder than I expected. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "But all those years, you acted like you had nothing." "I had enough," I said, "just not for pride." He shook his head. "Do you know how it looked? You showing up with one bag, expecting to live with us?" I met his eyes. "I didn't expect anything. I hoped." That word, hoped, ended the argument before it could start. Just then, a man from the next table stood up. He was older, wearing a faded jacket. He looked at me, then at my son. "Excuse me," he said, voice shaking. "Are you the man who paid for my wife's surgery 15 years ago?" My son froze. I stood slowly. "She survived?" The man nodded, eyes wet. "Because of you." The cafe had gone quiet, phones lowered, conversations stopped. My son's face flushed. For the second time in 2 days, the world he built on assumptions began to crack. But this was only the beginning, because what my son didn't know yet, what I had never told anyone, was the condition tied to every donation I made. And when that condition came back into play, it would force my son to choose between his pride and the values he thought he had learned. My son didn't speak on the drive home from the cafe. He kept his eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel too tightly. The city lights blurred past us, but inside the car, the air felt heavy, like something was waiting to be said and didn't care about timing. Finally, he broke the silence. "Dad, how much did you really give away?" I answered honestly. "Enough to change lives, not enough to ruin mine." He laughed once, bitter. "Then why do you live like you're poor?" I looked out the window. "Because comfort is quiet, pride is loud." That shut him up. When we reached his house, the lights were on. His wife stood near the door, arms crossed, clearly upset. She had heard things, from neighbors, from friends, from school parents. News travels fast when respect suddenly shifts. Inside, my grandson ran up to me and hugged my leg. "Grandpa," he said, "my teacher told the class about you today." My son turned sharply. "What do you mean?" "She said the shelter is reopening," the boy continued, smiling, "and it's because of you." My son's face tightened. That night, after everyone went to bed, he knocked on the guest room door. Not my room, just the guest room. "Dad," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." I waited. "I thought success meant money and appearances," he continued. "I thought letting you stay would make me look weak." I nodded. "It did. Just not the way you think." He swallowed hard. "Why didn't you ever correct me?" I finally told him the truth. "Every donation I made had one condition," I said, "that no one treat me better because of it." He frowned. "Why?" "Because respect that depends on money disappears the moment money does." He sat down, shaken. What he didn't realize yet was this: that condition was about to be tested, because the shelter was reopening, the hospital was expanding, and someone had just nominated me for public recognition, a spotlight I never wanted. and when that spotlight turned on, it would force my son to face his own reflection. The letter arrived 3 days later. Thick envelope, official seal. My name printed neatly on the front. My son brought it to me without opening it, like it might explode. "This came for you," he said, voice low. I already knew what it was. Inside was an invitation from the city council. They were holding a public ceremony to honor donors who had supported the hospital and the shelter for decades. My name was at the top of the list. My son read it twice, then a third time. "They want you on stage," he said, "in front of everyone." "I won't go," I replied. He looked up fast. "What?" "I didn't give to be seen," I said calmly. "That was never the deal." He paced the room. "But people already know. This could change how everyone sees you, how they see us." I met his eyes. "That's exactly why I won't go." That night, he argued with his wife. I heard my name. I heard the word embarrassing again. But this time, it wasn't about me being poor. It was about me refusing attention. The next day, my grandson came home from school upset. "Grandpa," he said, "why don't you want the award? My friends say you're famous." I knelt down and said, "Because the best things you do don't need clapping." He thought for a moment, then nodded. Kids understand faster than adults. But the city didn't take no easily. The shelter director came in person. She looked at my son and said, "Sir, your father saved this place more than once. People deserve to know who he is." My son stayed quiet. After she left, he said softly, "All my life, I thought I was ahead of you." I didn't respond. Because that evening, something unexpected happened. My son made a call, not to the city, not to the shelter, to his boss. And that call would cost him something he cared about deeply. The change didn't happen all at once. It started quietly. The next morning, my son didn't go to work. That alone was strange. He was the kind of man who believed rest was for people who hadn't made it yet. He sat at the kitchen table instead, staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. "You called your boss?" I said, not asking. He nodded. "I told him I needed time off, for family." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "And he reminded me," my son said bitterly, "that promotions go to people who are always available." He looked up at me then. "I chose to be unavailable." That was the first real sacrifice I'd seen him make. Later that day, he drove me to the shelter. He said nothing on the way. When we arrived, people recognized me immediately, not with cameras or applause, but with quiet smiles, handshakes, gratitude. My son watched all of it. A woman hugged me and said, "You never asked for credit." A man nodded and added, "That's why we trusted you." I saw it on my son's face, the realization. Respect earned slowly lasts longer than respect demanded loudly. That evening, back at his house, he surprised me again. He cleared out the guest room properly. New sheets, a lamp, space in the closet. "This isn't temporary," he said, eyes fixed on the floor. "If you want, you can stay." I studied him for a moment. Then I said, "I won't live where I'm tolerated." He flinched. "I'll live where I'm wanted." He swallowed hard. "Then I want you here, Dad." For the first time, the words didn't sound forced. But growth is rarely rewarded immediately. The very next day, my son received an email from work. Subject line, "Regarding your future with the company." And as he opened it, I knew this lesson wasn't done teaching yet. My son read the email 3 times. Each time, his face tightened a little more. "They're moving me off the leadership track," he said finally. "Not fired, just stalled." He laughed once, hollow. "All those years chasing titles, and it takes 1 week of choosing family to slow everything down." I said nothing. because this wasn't punishment, it was balance. That afternoon, he came with me again, to the hospital this time, the same building where years ago I signed checks in silence and walked out without my name on a wall. A young nurse recognized me and froze. "You're him," she whispered. My son stiffened beside me. The nurse continued, "My father tells your story. He says you taught him what service looks like." My son looked away. Later, in the parking lot, he finally asked the question that mattered. "Dad, if you knew this would cost you relationships, comfort, even respect, why did you still do it?" I answered honestly, because doing the right thing is only hard when you're watching yourself. That night, my son couldn't sleep. I saw him pacing the hallway, checking emails, refreshing messages that never came. Around midnight, he sat across from me and said, "I'm scared." I nodded. "Good. Fear means you're finally awake." He rubbed his face. "What if I lose everything I worked for?" I leaned forward. "Then you'll finally find out what was worth working for." The next morning, the city called again. This time, they didn't ask. They told us the ceremony was happening, with or without me, and my son was listed as the one to introduce me. He stared at the phone in disbelief, because now he couldn't hide, not from the city, not from his family. The auditorium was packed. Bright lights, rows of chairs, a large banner across the stage with the city's seal on it. My name printed in letters bigger than I was comfortable with. Backstage, my son paced like a man waiting for judgment. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I've given presentations to executives, but this," he stopped. "This feels different." "It should," I said. "This one's about truth." When his name was called, he walked onto the stage. The applause was polite at first, then warmer. He gripped the microphone and looked out at the crowd. Neighbors, doctors, teachers, people whose lives had crossed mine without his knowledge. He took a breath. "My father," he began, voice unsteady, "is a man I thought I understood." A murmur ran through the room. "I measured success by what could be seen, titles, houses, comfort, and because of that, I once turned him away." The room went still. My son swallowed hard. That was my failure. People leaned forward. Some gasped, others nodded. He continued, "The man I judged as weak was quietly strong. The man I thought had nothing was giving everything." When he finished, he looked straight at me, and for the first time in years, his eyes weren't defensive. They were open. When I walked onto the stage, the applause rose, real this time. Not loud, not wild, respectful, steady. I stepped to the microphone and said only this: "Everything you see here today happened because people helped each other without asking who would get credit." That was all. But the moment didn't end there. After the ceremony, a woman from the audience approached my son. She handed him a card and said, "If your father raised you, it's not too late." My son stared at the card, shaken, because printed on it was the logo of a company far bigger than the one he worked for, and they had been watching. Life didn't change overnight. It softened. The new company reached out to my son, not with promises, but with questions. Not about profits, but about values. They had seen the ceremony. They had heard his words. They wanted to know if he meant them. He turned down a higher salary at first. That surprised everyone, including me. "I don't want to win by losing myself again," he said. They respected that. Weeks later, he started a new role. Fewer titles, more purpose. He came home earlier. He listened more. He spoke less. And something else changed. One evening, my grandson sat between us and asked, "Dad, can Grandpa stay forever?" My son didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, "this is his home." Not out of guilt, not out of pride, but out of understanding. I still live simply, I still give quietly. My name is on a plaque now, but it doesn't matter as much as the sound of laughter in the house or the peace at the dinner table. As for my son, he learned what I hoped he would learn without ever needing a lecture. That respect is earned by how you treat people when no one is watching. That success means nothing if it costs you compassion. And that the strongest thing a man can do is admit he was wrong. Sometimes all it takes is one question from a child to remind an adult who they're supposed to be. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about family in a new way, subscribe now for more real-life stories about humility, redemption, and quiet strength. New stories drop soon, and the next one might feel even closer to home.